So speaking of holidays more specifically, it's funny, you were sharing with us off camera that you used to work in the ER and that you would see a spike in cases during holiday seasons for pets coming in with all kinds of things. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that experience so the audience can maybe learn some helpful holiday tips for their pets?
Yeah, so during the holiday season, the cases that come in through the ER, a lot of times it's for getting into things that they shouldn't have. So, for example, getting into the trash, pulling things off the countertops, things like that. And so, we always want to remind people that there are certain things that humans are perfectly good to eat, and it's perfectly safe, but for animals, it affects them different. So, things like chocolate, that's going to be toxic to them. Grapes, raisins, that's going to be toxic to them. Certain things like macadamia nuts, also a sweetener that's used in a lot of human products called xylitol. That is actually really toxic to dogs. So you want to make sure that they definitely don't get into anything that contains xylitol, or that they're not accidentally given anything that contains xylitol. And then when it comes to, a lot of the times during the holidays, people will eat turkey. We always want to remember that cooked bones, they tend to splinter when they're chewed on. So that's something that you definitely want to make sure that your pets avoid, because there's always a danger of eating cooked bones that splinter, and splintered bones in the GI tract does not make for a pretty picture.
I feel like we need to turn this into a written downloadable list for folks, because I just feel like all of those risks, especially the xylitol one, I didn't know about. I definitely knew about chocolate and the turkey and the bones things. But I didn't know that thing about xylitol. Oh my gosh. When you were working in the ER, was that kind of the most common concern during the holidays, is that the pets that were coming in usually just got into something they weren't supposed to?
Yeah, that was pretty common, especially getting into the trash, because, people will have, leftovers that they throw away. And you definitely want to make sure that they stay out of the trash, because a lot of times, especially if it's, old expired food, or if it's something that's, really greasy, then there's always a risk of pancreatitis. And so with pancreatitis, that can sometimes be really severe. So you want to make sure definitely that you keep the trash away from them, and lock it up, make sure they can't get into that.
Mm. Can I ask a question that we didn't actually prepare for at all, that now I'm just starting to think about? So when it comes to New Year's Eve fireworks, that's just what I thought about when I was talking about 4th of July. And I was like, yeah, you know what? New Year's Eve has tons of fireworks too. So what is your recommendation on CBD, I guess, management for higher anxiety dogs? Would you say just maybe administer the CBD like an hour or two before fireworks typically might start in your area? Or are you thinking like all day long so that they can kind of maintain get their endocannabinoid system, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but like warmed up for a calmer evening, midnight kind of thing?
Yeah, good question. So, and that ties into the appropriate dose for the specific animal. And it's similar to humans. It can vary quite a bit. And so what we've seen in the pharmacokinetic studies is that the way that each individual metabolizes and absorbs cannabinoids like CBD, it can differ. So, some dogs may require less, some dogs may require more. So what we always recommend is, especially like 4th of July, is to not try to figure it out the evening of the fireworks. Is try to figure out a couple days before, because sometimes you will have to adjust the dosage based off of that individual's response and that individual's endocannabinoid system. So some may need less, some may need more. So what I always recommend is try to figure it out starting from a couple days before, because that way, if you need to adjust the dosage upwards, that you do so. And then depending on, where people are at, sometimes in places like LA, fireworks are always going off. So it doesn't matter if it's like in the middle of the day, sometimes you'll hear fireworks. So sometimes it may just be more beneficial to have them on that regimen for a full 24 or 48 hours, depending on your city, depending on your surroundings. But each individual can vary, and especially in terms of, like how long it lasts in their system. But generally what we see is that after they take it, the peak effects will be within 1 to 2 hours. And then in general, it'll last for about 8 to 12 hours.
Got it. No, that's really good advice. Like kind of prep them to get a sense of what game day is going to be like, if you will.
Yep.
That's so cool. Okay. So last question on this topic is, when you're thinking about products and specifically formulation, have you seen, I guess, last two questions, swear. Have you seen a better performance with the treats in terms of bioavailability and absorption or an impact, or would you advocate a little bit more for tinctures or maybe a mixture of both because everyone's system is different?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, there hasn't been that much data that goes into that. But what we have seen is that when they're ingesting it, and if they're eating it with a meal, then that could potentially help to increase the absorption. In terms of, so right now, the way that we formulate it is we do it through tinctures. We actually haven't done treats yet, because one of the things that we talked about earlier is that every individual can be different. So, for example, one dog, one cat may be better with, 5 milligrams or 7.5 milligrams of CBD. And when you're using a tincture, that's really easy to be able to adjust that accurately and be able to give that consistently. But when you're actually using a treat, it's a little bit harder to be able to find a specific amount and break it up into an exact amount, and then also to ensure the homogeneity. So what can happen is when you're making an edible product, unless you blend it really thoroughly, what happens is you may have certain portions of cannabinoids that are located in certain areas of the treat or the edible product. So with an edible product, you always want to make sure it's very homogeneous, meaning that the cannabinoids are really well blended throughout. So no matter what portion of a piece that you take off, whether it's from this end or that end, you get the exact same amount or concentration of cannabinoids.